06424.
What war did you serve in and what branch of the service?
In the Korean War in the United States Air Force.
And what was your highest rank?
Sergeant, Airman First Class.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
Enlisted.
Where were you living at the time?
Living in East Hampton, Connecticut.
Why did you join?
The Korean War had just begun in June of 1950, and I wanted to be a pilot, and the only way that I knew of that I could become a pilot would be to join the United States Air Force. However, I ran into a little roadblock that I couldn't join and become a guaranteed pilot unless I had at least 2 full years of college, and I'd only had 1. So the Air Force said, no, you can't come in under those conditions. I thought that I could bypass that and come in as long as I had a high school diploma. And our then United States Senator thought the same because I contacted him. And the way he read the law, it was, I could take the exam at least. And they had changed the law, which he did not know. I didn't know. However, I couldn't join, I couldn't take the pilot training course unless I had the 2nd year of college. So the decision was whether to go back to college or stay in college and pick that 2nd year up, or to enlist and try to become a pilot through being in. So I was basically verbally promised by the recruiting sergeant, no problem, just sign here, and when you get in you'll be right away to pilot training school, which once I got in they had never heard of this kind of a maneuver, and hence I did not become a pilot, I became an aerial gunner.
An aerial gunner. When did they tell you you were going to be an aerial gunner instead of a pilot?
Well, when I found out I couldn't be a pilot, I didn't want to be in the Air Force without flying, so hence that was about the only thing that was available that I was interested in. I wasn't interested in being a radio operator or flight engineer. However, a gunner I would accept. Killing some time till I decided to finally go to flight training school if I could work it out as time went by. So
could you choose what you wanted to do, or did they give you a list of
you could choose what you wanted to do if it was available, and they could also take you and put you anywhere they wanted you to if it was needed. During basic training, the whole barracks next to our barracks, which would be about 100 men, was decided there was a shortage of cooks. Everyone went to cooking school whether they wanted to or not. And hence, I was lucky enough to become an aerial gunner candidate and went to gunnery school.
After you enlisted, do you remember where you did your basic training?
Yes, I do. It was, the first point of entry was Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. And it was so crowded at the time that some went off to Shepherd Field, which was in Wichita Falls, Texas, and that's where I went for basically 85% of my training.
To Shepherd Field?
Shepherd Field in Wichita Falls, Texas.
What was basic training like?
It was difficult for people that had come off the street as I had, because it's a totally new life, and you know, they try to break you down so they're the boss, and it works pretty well, and it is vital training that you have, that you need really, to be able to mix with people and sleep in the barracks. Simple things like this, when you're not used to that, it takes some adjusting, and that's all part of the training as well. A lot of physical stuff, a lot of mental stuff, but it's doable for everybody.
Do you know how long that was?
I think it was about 8 weeks or 13 weeks, somewhere in there.
Was this just general training, or were you specializing in aerial gunnery?
No, this was general training.
Where did you go from Shepherd Field?
Went to Lowry Field in Denver, Colorado for gunnery training.
And how long were you there?
I was there about 4 months, I believe. 5 months.
And what was that like? What kinds of things did you do there?
Well, it was strictly training for gunnery. That was the whole thrust of what you were there for. And you performed other acts as far as menial tasks because you were a student. So when you were not actually training, you would be out perhaps stoking furnaces or most anything that needed to be done on the base. That was all part of what you were expected to do, and everybody was expected to do while they were going through their training periods. And that's exactly what we did. I mean, we could have been working in a warehouse, we could have been cleaning aircraft, we could have been cleaning guns, all kinds of various tasks.
The actual training, was there one specific kind of gun that you were trained to shoot? Did you have to learn how to shoot it, clean it, repair it?
Everything you can think about doing with the particular gun, which was the 50 caliber M2 machine gun.
So did you become an expert in the 50 caliber?
Not really. They weren't listed as experts and so forth like you are with the rifle practice and so. However, I did become a sharpshooter and with rifle, but not expert. And that was with the 30 caliber carbine. But the 50 caliber gun was a heavy weapon, and you really aren't expected to sit and shoot at a ground target with that kind of by being handheld. Although in World War II they actually handheld the guns. The B-29 aircraft, which we were training to fly in, was remotely controlled guns. You were here and your guns were over there, but wherever you moved your gun sight, the guns would follow. So there was a different feeling to the weapon. You didn't get the actual feel of the weapon in your hand.
So it was a B-29 that you would be flying in?
B-29s.
And how big was the crew for a B-29?
11 men.
When you were at Shepherd, did you train with your crew yet, or you hadn't been assigned?
You're not even assigned yet to a crew. You're still at Lowry Field and going to actual school, gunnery school.
Where did you go from Lowry Field?
Went to Randolph Air Force Base back in San Antonio, Texas, where you actually crewed up with the other members, like radio operators, for example, bombardiers, navigators, flight engineer, pilot, co-pilot. Those people, all gunners, they all came together and you formed a crew. Well, prior to doing that, when I went to Randolph Field, there was a shortage of gunner instructors, and I was selected to become a instructor gunner, gunner instructor, which I did for over a year with almost no rank, with private first class corporal ratings. However, that's what we did. We were teaching the new fellows coming together. Because it's more than just shooting a gun. I mean, there's all kinds of other things that you're involved with the aircraft, as far as loading bombs, checking gas tanks, checking engines themselves, checking the electrical system of the gun systems. So there's a lot more involved than just, say, grabbing a gun and go shoot something.
Are you what they call cross-trained? Were you all cross-trained? Could you do any of the other jobs on the airplane, or just
No,
gunnery?
The positions were different locations in the plane, of course, and that you were trained in any one of the gun positions.
Do you remember any of your instructors from any of your training?
I remember them by sight. They're still in my mind, but I don't remember. Brown was one. I can think of Brown, who was our first man with any rank when I first went in, and that was basic training. But as far as gunnery training, I don't remember their names.
Where did you go from Randolph?
After being there for over like a year and a half as an instructor gunner, this other fellow and myself, we were three pals together, and one of them got married, so he wasn't going anywhere, but this other fellow, Al Stump, and myself, who had been part of the Treason, we were still at Randolph, and he was an instructor gunner also. And they were losing a lot of B-29s in training missions. So we decided that we would get to the war before the war ended, so we put ourselves on a crew, which we were able to do as instructor gunners. We just put ourselves into the crew, and we did that in the winter of 52, 53. Oh, yeah.
Did you put all three of you on the same crew so you'd
No.
have the same airplanes?
No, because the fellow that was married decided he wouldn't go because he was married. His wife didn't want him to, which is understandable.
Yep.
So he did not go with us. And as time went on, the day we landed in Tokyo, Japan, going over to Korea, or going over to Okinawa actually, there was the newspaper, which was the Stars and Stripes newspaper, Air Force, or Army, Air Force, Navy publication. Well, the day we got to Japan, there was a plane crash at Randolph Field in Texas, and he was one of the ones killed in it. So the ironics of he's staying there to be safe, and he's killed the day we get in the combat zone.
So you flew into Tokyo?
Yeah, well, I'll give you what we've crewed up now, and we're doing our crew training together at Randolph. We go from there up to Forbes Field in Topeka, Kansas, for more training as a crew. And we go to Salinas, Kansas. Smoky Hill was the name of the air base.
What did you do there?
Again, more trainings, more specific type training, strategic type bombing training. And from there we went to, briefly, we went to Stead Air Force Base in Reno, Nevada for winter mountain training in the Sierra Nevadas. And I have somewhere my certificate, my diploma here. It's a discharge, isn't it? Here it is. SAC Survival School, Strategic Air Command Survival School.
What's the date on that?
The date on that is February 6th through February 19th. 13 must have been 2 weeks, 13 days.
1952?
1953. February of 53.
And we can make a copy of that and attach it to the records.
Yeah, okay. So we did all that, and then off to San Francisco, and on our way to Tokyo, and then down to Okinawa.
Did you stay in Tokyo for any length of time?
Stayed in Tokyo for about almost a week, I think, 5 days, waiting for transportation to Okinawa.
Did you do anything in Tokyo while you were there?
Yes, I did. We saw a lot of places that didn't mean much to us now, but one was a particular good place. It was called the New Lion Beer Hall. And we went there, and I had a pocket full of money because while I was home I sold my old car, and I had that cash in my pocket, figuring in case I don't make it back I'll have a good time on the way out, which I did. And went back to Tokyo 35 years later, or 40 years later, when I was governor. Couldn't find the New Lion Beer Hall, however. Tokyo had changed just a little bit in 35 years. And then we ended up going to Okinawa. That's where we actually flew from. We flew from a home base, Kadena Air Force Base on Okinawa. And we would fly from there to North Korea.
Where did you land in North Korea?
We didn't land. We would fly over North Korea
And go return
and bomb.
to Kadena?
And bomb, return to Kadena.
What was the Air Force Base like at Kadena?
It was a very modernized facility. The Air Force had been there since the end of World War II, so this is 53. That was 8 years they'd been there. And when we got there, we had cement barracks. It was pretty good, 2 people to a room. If you were, I guess, sergeant or above, 2 people to a room, which was pretty decent back in those days. And the temperature was very hot because it is like basically a tropical isle. It really would be hot in the summertime, and humid, very humid. And we would do training from there, patrolling from there, and combat bombing from there. So that was what we did at night. Were all night missions. Last time the B-29s flew in the daytime, the MiGs shot so many of them down that they didn't fly in the daylight anymore, and that was in '52. They hadn't flown since '52.
Did you always fly with the same crew in the same aircraft?
Not in the same aircraft necessarily. They always the same crew, except once, going back to my instructor gunner days, there was a crew that was having a lot of trouble. So the colonel of the bomb wing assigned me to fly with that crew as an instructor gunner, as well as they had an instructor pilot and a few other instructors. So pulled me back to my old job of instructor gunner for that just one flight. And that was the only time that I flew without the crew.
How many missions did you fly while you were stationed over there?
I flew 12 missions and the war ended. And the night that it ended, we were supposed to be going up to the Yalu River again to the Antung, Manchuria, the Korean side of the Antung, of the Yalu. And that was it. So needless to say, we were a bunch of happy people when we didn't have to go. We unloaded the bombs and unloaded our guns, and that was great.
And what was your specific job? Were you always the tail gunner?
No, never.
Well,
Once.
that's what they told me.
No. Central Fire Control, which is the top gunner. Central Fire Control. And from that position, you call the shots for the other gunners, if you'd see them before they would, and you'd see everything on the top of the aircraft. Everything on the top. You could go up 360 degrees in a bubble. Your head was in a bubble. You know, actually out of the plane in this bubble, which was just about the size of your head. And your guns were here. You held both gun handles. And your gun that you were actually firing, your twin guns, they were about 3 feet behind you in a gun turret that did 360 and 90-degree elevation as well, and a 4-gun turret which made 650 calibers under your control, 40 feet up towards the front of the airplane. So you had the two top turrets, and you'd call them out if a plane was coming in. You'd call them out so the gunner on that side would be able to shoot at him going away if you saw him in time and so forth. But that was your job, the upper gunner, and calling the shots for the other guy.
Were you actually in combat on any of your missions?
We were shot at every time we went up there.
All 12 times?
All 12 times.
You never got lucky and didn't see somebody?
No, we were very lucky. We were very lucky we never hit. Very lucky we never shot down.
You were never hit?
Never hit. The plane was never hit. And you went through flak sometime. You just couldn't believe that you could fly an airplane through that flak without getting hit. And somehow you didn't get hit.
And your plane was never damaged?
Never damaged. Never hit.
You were very lucky. Were you awarded any medals or citations?
The Air Medal.
And why did you receive that?
Really, it was functionary. It was good record. Flew 10 missions, which you got the Air Medal after you flew 10 missions. And the crew was a good crew. Everybody on the plane got the Air Medal. So that's the only, and other medals are like the Good Conduct Medal, those type of things. But the meaningful one is the Air Medal.
What was life like while you were stationed over there on a daily basis? Like, what would a typical day be? Did you fly a mission every single day or once a week, or?
No, you normally the idea was every third night you'd be over Korea, because there were 2 other bomb wings, and one night would be this wing, next night that wing, maybe the third night you're our wing. So every third night you'd be up over Korea. But that didn't last long because we only got the 12 missions in. So it wasn't every third night. Many times it'd be a week before you went again. But the ideal situation was every third night.
What would you do when you weren't flying missions?
Well, pretty much on your own to do much, maintain everything properly, the equipment. But other than that, you didn't have any real duties per se, that you were assigned to do, which made it very easy. We had our own swimming pool. It was very much like being in the States. This place was basically brand new. And they had American school teachers over there teaching the Army people. They'd be assigned there for 1 or 2 years because they were occupation forces, basically. They weren't fighting anybody, and they had their families over there. So it was a very strange situation. It was like probably being in England during World War II without the bombing. I mean, you lived in a nice place, and you ate good food and everything else, and then you flew your mission, got shot at, and came home and get right back to this nice place. So it was a real strange way to fight a war, but that's the way it was, and that's the way it is in the Air Force, really, if you're lucky enough to get a good base.
I'm going to ask you some questions now about living conditions. How did you stay in touch with your family while you were overseas?
Wrote.
Were you a letter writer?
Not really. I wrote a few. My mother kept them all. So she kept them all.
What was the food like?
I cannot complain. The food was all right. It was good. Yeah, no complaints.
You always had a mess hall to eat in? You were never eating rations out in the field?
We'd eat rations, not in the field, no. We'd eat rations on the flights, because those flight missions, they were 10, 12 hours. So you'd go up there with sandwiches and so forth. Those were your so-called in-flight lunches, which were nothing to rave about, but you didn't have to eat it if you didn't want it. You wouldn't starve to death while you're up there flying. But in the mess halls were good, you know, okay. Same old food, but it still was good. It was plentiful. And
did you have enough supplies, materials, resources of anything you needed?
yes, we did.
Did you lack for anything?
No.
Did you feel pressure or stress?
Well, you felt a little, yeah, you felt a little pressure and a little stress.
Probably, especially on the nights you were going on a bombing.
Well, sometimes the afternoons before when you knew you were going, you know. Once you're on, I never had a problem in the airplane. Once you get in the airplane, you know.
Was there anything special that you did for good luck?
No, not really.
How about entertainment? Was there any entertainment on or near your base?
They would have some stuff, like they had a nightclub for the officers club, of course, which we were, as enlisted people, we couldn't go to. But they had NCO club, which we could, and they'd have entertainment. Sometimes there would be Okinawans themselves with a band or whatever it might be, playing American music. Or it could be a stateside group or something of that nature. But there was, yeah, you lacked for nothing, truly. You couldn't complain about it, except that you didn't want to be there. You'd rather be home. But other than that, it was not a bad place to be.
Did you see any USO shows while you were over there?
Well, no, I didn't. I saw only one USO show, and I saw that back at Lowry Field. And it was a Christmas show of 1950. And it was Bob Hope, which was a headliner and a great guy, I thought, and Frances Langford, who was his singer and kind of the sweetheart of the operation there. She was a good-looking lady and a great singer. And I remember one thing in particular. They walked out on the stage, and he did, and then when he introduced her, Frances Langford, out she struts. Well, she walks right by him, and he slaps her on the can and says, "And her future is all behind her." Which, of course, today the women of the world would have shot Bob Hope, but back in those days that was accepted and everybody laughed. I don't know if she did, but everybody else did. Something that obviously I'll remember forever. I still remember it.
Did you have any leave while you were overseas?
Yeah, I was home. No, not overseas, no, because I was only there a short time.
How long was it a total of?
Well, the war ended. The war ended in July, so I was out of there in October, November. I can't remember. It was the end of October. Say by the end of October, and I didn't get there until like April. So I was just there.
You were only there for a few months.
Just
so no leave while you were overseas.
No, no.
Did you have leave when you came back to the United States, or
No.
before you left the United States?
Before I left, but not after I came back. No.
Did you travel anywhere while you were in the service?
Well, Mexico, and we got to Hong Kong when I was when I was in the, it was right after the war. We went down there on a seaplane tender, our crew. There's a little bonus for something that crew of the month and something else that we did. But that was a nice trip. That was different.
Any other travel while you were in the service?
Not really, no. We've stayed at a lot of places in the States. You know, sometimes we'd fly missions and stay overnight when we got there and things of that nature. But as far as any real service time overseas, traveling around, no.
Can you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events?
Every day was a laugh.
Star?
Oh, John Wayne.
John Wayne?
That's right, I forgot about that.
Well, so tell me about John Wayne.
John Wayne. This was in Stead Air Force Base back there in Nevada. And after going through the air base, after going through the mountain training, they would give you a day off, night off in the day in Reno, which was like 15 miles from the air base. So on the way in, we took a cab in, a bunch of us, and we asked the driver, must get big tips around here with all the winners. So he said he got the biggest tip he'd ever received in his life the night before. And he said, you know who gave it to me? And we said, no, John Wayne. And he was doing a movie out there, I can't remember which one. We walk into the bar at Harold's Club. Who's the only guy at the bar that we recognized? John Wayne. So of course, you kind of saddle up to him as a crew. And he bought all the enlisted men a drink. He didn't buy the officers, figuring that they could afford their own or something. So,
Were you an enlisted man or
yes,
an officer?
enlisted.
When did you get promoted to sergeant? Is there something in between private and sergeant?
Oh yeah, there's. Well, now it's all called airman, but it used to be private first class, private second class, private sergeant, buck sergeant. Well, that's where I stopped, but then they changed that to airman basic, airman third class, airman second, airman first. So sergeant and airman first were the same basic rank.
When were you promoted to sergeant? While you were over in Korea?
No, I was looking for a staff sergeant promotion when I was there, which it didn't come. 52, I guess it was. Can't remember exactly when.
Where were you stationed at the time?
Randolph, I think. Yeah, Randolph Field.
Can you recall any other unusual events?
No, can't.
Well, if you think of anything
Yeah,
as...
you'll leave and I'll think of a dozen, but at the moment I can't.
And
I can't think of any great humorous thing that would make any sense.
You will as soon as I leave.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Later.
Oh, yeah, oh,
And
yeah.
if you think of it.
Yeah, the pilot on our crew, the air commander, he presented every one of us with a Zippo lighter with the names of the bases we were stationed at, which was kind of a nice thing.
Your pilot gave you each that?
Yeah.
And it's got all those bases engraved?
Yep.
I'll take a close-up of it later when we're done with the interview. That was very nice.
Yep. Well, he gave everybody that smoked anyway.
Did you guys play pranks on each other?
No, but I could tell you one incident, which we both thought it was a prank. My roommate in these two-room places was a guy by the name of Al Stump, and we had been down to the club one night, so we came back and we both had a few cocktails. So I jumped in my bed and he jumped in his bed, and I'm fast asleep, and I guess he's asleep. All of a sudden my bed started shaking, and I figured it must be him shaking my bed. Leave me alone, leave me alone. He shook again. So I got up, woke up, and he's still in his bed. He said, what are you shaking my bunk for? I said, I'm not shaking your bunk. Then both of us were sitting on the bed opposite. Our feet are on the floor, and all of a sudden the floor starts moving. It's an earthquake. So
So what'd you do?
ran outside as quick as we could, and it stopped. But they flew a lot of the B-29s out because it really was a real earthquake. And funny feeling, by the way.
Was that the first earthquake you were in?
First only and hopefully last. I didn't appreciate it at all, nor did anybody else, but it felt awful good to get outside. There's all I could figure of these great cement buildings come crashing down around you, and you're not going to survive that. So that was humorous for a moment, but it didn't stay that way long.
Now, you said earlier that your missions were like 10 or 12 hours long.
Yeah.
I had no clue that they flew for that long.
Oh yeah, sure.
So you would probably sleep during the day?
You had the day up. Basically, you had the next day off, but you briefed and everything, so that would take a couple of hours, hour and a half. Briefed on the mission. Then you actually were in the air anywhere from 8 to 10 hours, 12 hours, depending on. Oh, I don't know. It's over there. I haven't got it. It's over here. Yeah, there's a picture of the.
When you flew your missions, did you always go to the same place?
Oh no.
Did you ever go to the same place? Was it
Yeah.
always different?
I think we hit one of them or twice. Let me see. I've got it on this book here. There's inside the front cover, there's a page of the places that we were at bombing.
Oh, these are all your missions?
Yeah.
I'll note that I will include a copy of
Want
the
me
list
to write it out while you're...
of the 12 missions that Governor O'Neill flew on.
So what about this guy? You were same time?
Oh, the Korean guy?
I wrote this book.
Yeah, he was. Now here's a list of,
Do you have any photographs?
yeah,
Yes?
yes.
And we'll attach those to the record.
There weren't any 12, so here's what there were. 840, 820, 610, 9, 835, 1005, 55, 835, 760, 9, 835, 948, 95.
What are those numbers?
Hours.
Oh.
1005, and just give me some 1020.
Yeah.
Then it didn't get to 12.
Well, still, that's a long time.
Oh yeah. They're in the plane quite a while.
You want me to write the times down here too, please?
No, that's all right. You don't have to do that.
What did you think of officers and fellow soldiers?
Well, in general, I thought it was a pretty good group of men. Some of the officers were how shall I put it? In some instances, they were bigger than their britches, we'll put it that way. However, many were very, very good men and showed good leadership and appreciated being with them.
Did you make any friendships and then stay in touch with any fellow soldiers?
Well, yes, indeed. Once never see them at all, never see my crew members at all. The ironics are that I told you Johnson, this kid got killed at Randolph Field. That didn't go overseas with us. And afterwards, this fellow by the name of Al Stump, who was part of the threesome, was our left gunner. He had a hard time over there. It bothered him, flying combat bothered him. And he had a bad upbringing at home. So he and I got out together. We got out, I think it was the 19th of December, 1953. and he was from LaPorte, Indiana. So instead of flying home, we decided we'd take a bus, save a lot of money, and see the USA for a couple of days, or however long it took to drive in from Roswell, New Mexico. That's where we were discharged from. So the following spring, which would have been the spring of 1954, I hadn't heard from him. He was going to contact me, and I was going to contact him. We didn't. So the following spring, I drove out there. Another fellow from here and I drove out for a vacation, something to do, destination to go to, Chicago area. So we go out there, and I knew his brother-in-law was a cop in LaPorte, Indiana. So I figured if we go to the police station, I'll find the brother-in-law, and he'll know certainly where his brother-in-law lives. So the brother-in-law says, that bum, he went back into service. So he wasn't a bum to me, brother. So he says, well, he went back into service. So he said, I don't know where he is. So I said, well, do you know if he went in the Air Force or not? So he said, I think he did. But you'd be better off if you don't contact him. He's a hell of a guy, hell of a nice brother-in-law. So about 3 months later, I get a letter from this other fellow I had known, who was still in the service, still in the Air Force. And he had run into Al Stump back at Lowry Field in Denver, in the service, doing gunnery type things, looking for Al, for Lane, and looking for me. You know, he's out of it. And they found him up in the hills, shot himself. So consequently, they were the two best friends I had, and they're both dead, you know. So that's the way it goes. It's something you can't.
Wow.
Yeah, heavy stuff. So there's one other fellow, Larson, Tommy Larson out of Ohio. He comes east every so often, so we see each other. But all the rest of the crew, they've all gone thither and yon. And my pilot, not the aircraft commander, which is the real pilot, but the so-called co-pilot back in those days, he was from Long Island, and he stopped in to see me once on his way through Connecticut when I was governor. And he couldn't believe it, and I said, don't feel funny, I couldn't believe it either. So here we are.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you stay in touch with any of them now?
No, I haven't in years.
Do you recall your last day in service? Well, let's go back. You said you were actually over there when the war ended. Do you remember
Right.
what you were doing when you heard that the war was over?
Yeah, we were getting ready to fly up to Korea.
What was the reaction around you?
Super duper, thank God it's over. There wasn't anybody that was sorry to see it end, I'll tell you.
So you
Nobody that I knew of, anyway.
didn't take off that night. What'd you do instead?
Well, we did a few great things. We improved our minds and everything else by clearing it with alcohol and such things.
You did a few great things.
Great things, no question.
And then after the war ended, how long did you stay in Korea before they shipped you home?
No, Okinawa now.
Or Okinawa?
Oh, I think we left there in the end of October. Not quite sure exactly what, it's in here someplace, but I don't.
Oh, we can check the exact date.
Yeah.
And did you fly directly home to the United States?
Yeah, we did. I'm trying to think. We flew back to San Francisco, and we were to be assigned to Roswell, New Mexico, which is Walker Air Force Base. So we had our druthers as to how to get there. They were going to pay for it. They didn't have transportation, so they were going to give us, which they do, the money to travel. And we decided again to take ground transportation, because we're flying all over the place, so we decided we'd take the bus. And we took the train from Frisco to Los Angeles and visited for a couple of days with a friend of ours, mother and father, who was in Korea. And haven't seen him or heard them since too either. So we stayed there overnight, 1 or 2 nights, and then we took the train to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and hitchhiked down to from Klein's Corners, New Mexico, down to Roswell.
And how long were you stationed at Roswell?
Probably a month thereabouts.
What did you do while you were there?
Absolutely nothing.
More great things.
Well, the plane, the B-29 had phasing them out, so there was nothing for us to fly except B-36s. And we had 10 months to go. I had 10 months to go. And the question was that by the time they train you for the beach at 36, you'll have 6 months to go. And it's hardly worth their training. They wanted you to get out. It was over. They weren't shooting at anybody, you know, and they were bringing guys home. So we got out early. I got out in...
So they didn't make you stay the 10 months?
No, got out at 8 months short. Had 32 months out of... no, I had... Yeah, 32 months out of... I can't be right. 38 months. Had 38 months out of 48 months. Enlistment was for 48 months, 4 years. So I actually served 38, 10 short.
Do you remember your last day in service?
Basically, yeah. But I mean, I don't remember, you know, doing
There was nothing memorable.
No, there was no Old Lang Syne or any of that type stuff, no.
So you basically got your walking papers and
Yeah, and got on that bus and headed for Connecticut.
What did you do in the weeks and the days right after you got out of the service?
Adjusted.
You went home to East Hampton?
East Hampton, my father and mother's house. And I had worked at Pratt & Whitney before going to college, before I went in the service, so after a couple of weeks, I guess, I went back to work there.
And what did you do at Pratt & Whitney?
Drafting.
Did you ever go back and get that second year at college?
Never did. Never did. Did some, but never got the full second year, no.
And then how long did you stay with Pratt & Whitney as a draftsman?
Well, I'll tell you, I got a 5-year pin there. However, I didn't serve but a few months there because 38 of those 5 years, 38 months of the 5 years was in the service.
And they count those?
And they counted those, yeah. So we picked up a few at the end and picked up a few in the beginning. So probably 2 years or so, all really.
And what did you do after you left Pratt & Whitney?
Prudential Insurance Company.
What was your job there?
Sales.
How long did you stay at Prudential?
5 years.
Then what'd you do?
O'Neill's Tavern.
That's been around that long?
Oh, it's been along forever.
And where's that located?
On Route 66, East High Street, East Hampton.
And I believe it's still there?
It's still there, but it has a different name, and it's called the Governor's Tavern now.
Do you have anything to do with it?
Nothing to do with it at all.
Oh, so once you sold it, it was...
That was it. However, I do eat there, and we do have a drink there on occasion, and it's a nice little place, and if you're going by, you should stop.
What did you do from between O'Neill's Tavern and becoming governor of the state of Connecticut?
Well, that's what allowed me the time to travel about trying to become the governor, which I did not intend to do. My desire was just to become a legislator. I always wanted to be a member of the House of Representatives in Connecticut. And ran 3 times. Twice was defeated. And then finally the third time I won in '66. And then we've been winning ever since, one way or another, you know, to end up being the governor.
And how long did you serve as the governor of Connecticut?
10 years and 10 days.
Did you try to work it that way?
Not really, no. That's the way it ended.
Longest serving.
Yeah, longest serving governor since 1809.
The longest serving governor of the state of Connecticut since 1809?
1809, yeah.
And I know that somewhere in there you got married.
Married in '62. I purchased this house, which was a summer shack with a furnace at the time, and that was as winterized as it was. It was going to be my bachelor pad, and along came my wife. 6 months later we were married, no bachelor pad. Been here ever since, 42 years.
Wow. Doesn't look like you have any regrets either.
No, I don't think so.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
American Legion and the Veterans of Foreign War.
Are you a member now?
Still, both.
Do you know the post numbers?
No, I don't without looking at my cards.
What towns are they located?
East Hampton both.
Oh, do you have both in the same town?
Yeah, they're both. I think the Legion post is 64. The VFW post is 4 numbers. I can't remember them.
That's okay. Have you been active in activities with either American Legion or VFW?
When I first got out of the service, I participated in some of their functions. I've always been a parade addict, so I still used to do those, and I still do parades, but not for them. I mean, for the positions I've held. So I still like to do parades. But when I first got out of the service, I was fairly active, but not trying to go through their ranks. You know, I had no desire to become the commander, for example, so I never tried. I just didn't have the time to do that. I was kind of busy doing.
Do you participate in any of their activities now?
No, not really. We might go to a function of theirs, or dinner or so forth, but as far as being out there grinding away, no.
Of the helicopter.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was quite well. We didn't really have anything to do with it. The helicopter was in front of the VFW post, which is an Apache helicopter, and they've got it mounted on a pedestal outside. And that's it's not a model. It's the actual aircraft. And they had brought it back from wherever it was, the helicopter graveyard, and fixed it up, and it looks great up there. And it's got two mummies in there, that look like the pilot and the gunner. And the people that actually flew it in Korea, 2 different guys, they came to this dedication. 2 different people that flew it at 2 different times in Korea, that particular one.
Wow.
So which was really a touching thing, you know. So they do things like that, and they do good things.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Did it do what?
Did it influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
I was always interested in the military. And even as a kid during World War II, when the war first began, I was 9 years old, September 1939, and I followed the Polish campaign, starting with maps and stuff from papers, and my own little scribbled maps during the whole war. So by the time it ended, I was 15, and I was deeply enmeshed in that type of thinking and theory. And I'm still
That's good, that's good.
I'm still reading American history and all those types of books, and military books, and watch the military channel. So I really, yeah, I've had a lifetime interest, I guess.
Have you had any reunions?
Never had a reunion, no.
How would you say your military service affected your life?
Oh, I think it broadened your perspective without question. And the sad part, of course, is someone getting killed or wounded seriously. But the military, in my mind, is a broadening experience for anybody. And I think you missed something if you didn't participate. I'm not saying you participate in war, but I'm just talking about participating in the organization, whichever one it may be. I think it does broaden one's perspective on what the real world is like or about. And I would advise it. As a matter of fact, I think that I'm not so sure we shouldn't have a peacetime draft. I think perhaps we should. Finding ourselves in a situation at the present time where we're running out of men. And that's a serious thing when a nation of 250 million people can't put enough men in the field that they want to in one nation. That does not speak well for our capabilities of defense.
Now, you picked the Air Force. Was it mainly because you wanted to fly it, or
Yes, yes.
that was it? Were there any other reasons that you picked the Air Force?
No, it wasn't like that I liked the uniform or anything. No, the answer to that was I wanted to fly, and that's why I wanted to become at least a gunner, because I didn't want to be in the Air Force for 4 years and not be a flyer.
Did you fly at all after you got out of the Air Force?
I flew a little bit, pilot training a little bit, and didn't complete that either. Sounds like I'm a quitter here, because again, a time frame. I just didn't have the time to do it with the other things I was doing in life.
Well, you were kind of busy in the States.
Yeah, it was kind of busy.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add, or anything else that we haven't covered that you can think of?
Oh, downtown or
No,
central?
New England Air Museum.
Oh, the New England Air Museum. Yeah, I'm involved in that.
You were involved with the New England Air Museum?
In Bradley Field, yeah, I was vice
You want to
president.
tell me about that?
Well, I was involved there as soon as I left the governor's chair. I went there, became the vice president, never to become the president. It's a non-paying job, just a title. And I still, up until last year, I served as the vice president, and finally said I just can't make the meetings as I did, and can't participate as I used to. But I was helpful to them as governor. I was governor, and since I've been out as governor, and as far as
So
doing...
how long have you been the vice president?
I was vice president for probably 6-7 years. I've been out as vice president for about a year now. Yeah, the Air Museum. I said that, didn't I? The Air Museum?
Is she familiar with it? Are you familiar with the Air Museum?
Not entirely, but I'm sure the rest of the country and the world
Well, I
is.
mean, tell
not.
them it's there.
Well, there's all kinds of military aircraft and civilian aircraft from the United States.
Any B-29s there?
B-29 completely restored on the outside, getting restored on the inside, sharing the airplane with a bomb wing that flew it, the first B-29 bomb wing that flew during World War II out of China. And that's not a particular plane of theirs, but it symbolizes that airplane, which I believe is the 58th bomb wing, I think. It's the number. And that's a beautiful looking aircraft. Of course, it brings back a lot of memories to me whenever I go in here and see that airplane. And we raised funds enough to get them a hangar to hangar it. And now they just got a couple of other aircraft. There's Saberjet, the F-86, which fought the MiGs over Korea on my day when I was over there. And we have a MiG aircraft up there from the Korean War era. And the fellow that flew one of the MiGs at the end of World War II, the war had ended. But prior to the end of the war, the Americans, we offered a reward of anybody that would fly a MiG down from North Korea and surrender it. And this fellow did, this Korean pilot, flew it down to Kimpo Air Base in Seoul, Korea, and didn't know about the reward at all. Suddenly he finds himself okay, free, and $100,000 in his pocket, which is not bad. Back in 1953, that was a lot of money. So I saw him and the plane, the MiG, on Okinawa. They brought it down there to test it back in '53. And we had some of our best test pilots come over, and that MiG just out-climbed the big Saberjet that we had right away from it, which was far faster airplane and more maneuverable. However, ours was a better airplane and had the American pilots, which were better. But we've got one of those up there, the MiG up there, the B-29 up there that they used to shoot at, and it's quite a place.
You said our pilots were better. I've had several veterans tell me the United States training compared to other
The
countries.
best.
You think that we're far superior?
I think we're the best. We really do.
Are there any other stories, incidents, facts that you can remember?
No, I think that's good. I mean, we could go on for a week, but where do you start and where do you stop, and, what's the sense of it all?
Well, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview, and I'd like to thank you for your service to our country.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.